Democratic senator from Connecticut, top Harris Walz campaign surrogate, and close friend of President Biden, sat down this morning for an interview on the Fox Propaganda Network, where he relentlessly and methodically dismantled the bad faith pro-Trump talking points, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, and they are all from the most recent episode of Fox News Sunday, which is the closest thing to, I don't know, Fox News is Meet the Press or Face the Nation. They tend to interview a Democratic surrogate or a liberal surrogate, and then a Republican surrogate, a conservative surrogate, usually politicians or operatives of some kind. It's hosted by Shannon Bream, who took over from the legendary Chris Wallace. She is nowhere near as good as Wallace, in my opinion. She's still pretty blatantly conservative, but outside of Jessica Tarlov or Neil Cavuto, she's probably the closest thing to a good faith actor that Fox has, and she will ask tough questions occasionally of Republican surrogates. But in this case, she sits down with another interview with Chris Murphy, who is a frequent guest on that program, and he does a very good job of managing. He has a good rapport with Shannon Bream. She clearly respects him. And in this particular episode, he dismantles, in various sections, bad faith talking points about Vice President Harris with respect to policy and Donald Trump's economic record compared to the Biden-Harris administration. So we're going to play some of these clips and unpack them together.
Real democracy calls for more debates, more interviews. Listen, the policy section of the website remains blank, last I checked. So when are we going to get more from the vice president?
Well, I think you have heard the vice president roll out several very important, detailed policy proposals. She just proposed a massive tax cut for small businesses. She's proposed a massive investment in housing to bring the cost of rent and mortgages down for Americans. She's going to go after price gougers to try to make sure that we continue to drive inflation down. She wants an expansion of the child tax credit. She's investing in the middle class. She's talked about an opportunity agenda where everybody has the chance to succeed, which is very different than Donald Trump's agenda. Donald Trump has made it very clear, if you put him back in power, he's going to think about only one group of people, and that's his friends at Mar-a-Lago, another massive tax cut for the richest people in America. So I don't doubt that Kamala Harris will continue to roll out proposals to invest in small businesses, to invest in the middle class. I think the contrast is pretty striking between a candidate on the Democratic side who wants to make sure that we grow the economy from the middle out, and Donald Trump, who still believes in this magical thinking of trickle-down economics, where if you give him and his friends billions of dollars, eventually that'll find its way down to everybody else. That's just not how it works.
And he's right. I mean, decades worth of macroeconomic analyses reaffirmed that trickle-down economics was just dishonest at best and a complete scam at worst. And it did not work the way the conservatives like President Ronald Reagan and other proponents of trickle-down economics have long said that it does. Okay. But this is really important because one of the criticisms that you hear persistently, not just from conservatives, but due in large part to conservatives having such a stranglehold on setting the media narrative, is this idea that the vice president is light on policy. Well, she might be light in the sense that she has not formally written it down on her website. But the fact of the matter is, if you watch her speeches, she talks about concrete policy proposals in every single one, which is what Senator Murphy is talking about, and that should count for something. But the goalpost is constantly moved by bad faith actors. Okay, fine, she talks about it in speeches, but when is she going to talk about it in interviews? And then, of course, you have to compare it to Donald Trump, because the implication is that Donald Trump is not only polling well on policy, which is true, unfortunately, I would argue completely inexplicably, completely undeservedly, but he does poll well on certain policy issues. But if you ask Donald Trump to address policy issues substantively without a teleprompter in front of him, it's utter disaster, which leads to viral mimetic moments like the other night when he spoke in front of the Economic Club of New York, and he was asked how a second Trump administration would reduce the cost of childcare, and he went on a 3-minute non sequitur word salad, which was completely embarrassing, and again has been talked about nonstop on social media. If the media, certainly conservative media, but even mainstream media, had any sense of fairness and fairness of expectation of the two candidates, then that would be covered so much more, because there is nothing that the vice president has ever said or done which is anywhere near as embarrassing or as insubstantial as what Donald Trump did there. So it's good what Senator Murphy is talking about, saying that actually the vice president has many concrete policy proposals in her agenda that she has publicly expressed, and they stand in stark contrast to what we're getting from Donald Trump. In this next clip, Senator Murphy goes into detail dismantling the misperception that Donald Trump's economy during the Trump administration was better than the Biden-Harris economy. And again, I know this is something we talk about quite a bit on this program, on this YouTube channel, but it bears repeating. And note that he's able to say this on the Fox Propaganda Network to Fox viewers who might not otherwise hear this stuff.
Well, listen, let's compare the economic record of Donald Trump against the economic record of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Under this administration, we have seen record job growth in this country. We have manufacturing booming, unemployment at a record low. When Donald Trump left office, we had unemployment at a record high. He told us he was
We were in the middle of the pandemic, to be fair.
We were going to rebuild the manufacturing sector under Donald Trump. We lost manufacturing jobs. So there is a clear contrast between Donald Trump's record as president, where our economy fell to pieces, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden,
in the middle of a pandemic,
who have rebuilt the economy and, by the way, driven down inflation at a rate faster than all of our other high-income nation competitors.
But again, President Trump handed off, he will argue, I'm sure, Tuesday night, an inflation rate of 1.4% in the middle of a pandemic. The majority of jobs lost during the pandemic had come back. We spiked to more than 9%. I mean, 40 years we haven't seen those kinds of numbers.
Correct. And that happened in every single high-income economy because coming out of the pandemic, no country had the supply chains sufficient to be able to withstand the surge in demand. But it is also true that over the last 4 years, inflation has come down faster in the United States than those other countries. GDP has grown at a faster rate than those other countries. And today we are sitting in an economy where anybody who wants a job can get one because we have record low unemployment. Donald Trump is advertising that he is going to bring back the same kind of chaotic economic policies, the same investment in the top 1% in corporations that helped drive our economy into a ditch during his time in office.
What he's going to say is poverty was down.
So this is what's interesting. And we get this a lot, certainly again from conservative media, but I would argue even centrist mainstream media too, which is this idea that, you know, in contrast to the fact that President Biden inherited a disastrous economy from Donald Trump, this idea, well, it was recovering and it was on the path to recovery. There is no question. But we also know that President Biden's agenda accelerated that economic growth. So, for example, the fact of the matter is that we had the vaccine when President Biden was inaugurated. It was created under the Trump administration. However, the rate of vaccinations was still relatively low. President Biden came in. He inherited no formal federalized plan from the Trump administration about how to distribute these vaccines and make sure that they were getting into the arms of Americans. So President Biden had to create one on the spot, and the rate of vaccinations grew exponentially. It was about twice as much, if I remember correctly, under President Biden compared to the Trump administration. As a matter of fact, President Biden thought we'd get 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days, and he doubled it. And that allowed the economy to open safely back up. Not all of the jobs lost under the Trump administration came back. There were companies, there were positions that never returned. And even if you control for jobs that, you know, basically lost under the pandemic and restored, the fact of the matter is that even that Biden has still created many more jobs per month, tens of thousands of jobs per month on average, compared to the Trump administration, even if you control for COVID for both administrations, jobs lost under Trump and jobs that had to be recovered under Biden. Even if you control for COVID, Biden's jobs record is just better than Trump's. Trump promised that he would have 6% average GDP growth per quarter. He never achieved that even prior to the pandemic. He said that he wouldn't add a nickel to the national debt. He added $8 trillion. He said he would wipe out all the debt that he inherited from his predecessors. And speaking of inheritance from predecessors, what Shannon Bream always leaves out and what Fox propagandists always leave out is that they may want to debate, well, listen, by the time Trump left office, the economy was not at the worst place that it was under the Trump administration, that it really hit rock bottom under Trump and then started to recover. And so by the time Trump left office, at least we were going in the right direction. You can make that argument. But by that same logic, Donald Trump inherited a pretty freaking good economy from President Obama. As a matter of fact, the vast majority, if not the totality, of the pre-pandemic economic trends under the Trump administration were trends that he inherited from Barack Obama. But Fox and Republicans always like to leave that part out. See, again, what it comes down to is they want you to believe that Donald Trump walked into office January 20th, 2017, and created the modern American economy with his two hands and two sticks that he just rubbed together. He inherited nothing good, nothing. It was like the Big Bang, right? From nothing, there came everything. That's what they want you to believe. And then, even though it's not true, and then all of the good stuff about the Biden economy, well, Donald Trump basically gave that to President Biden. The asymmetry of the standards and the assessment of the evidence is just staggering. And it's not true. They're so inconsistent even on that. Inheritance matters when it's a Democrat. It doesn't matter when it's a Republican. And so Chris Murphy there was pretty relentless. And the fact of the matter is, though there are still issues to this day with the economy, and though Donald Trump certainly enjoys a perception advantage holistically on the economy, the fact of the matter is, number one, we do have the greatest economy in the world by far under President Biden's stewardship and consequently Vice President Harris. And by most macroeconomic metrics, the Biden-Harris economy is better than the Trump-Pence economy. And again, the economy that Trump was given by President Obama was pretty damn good. So when you consider, again, I always use the skyscraper metaphor. Imagine when President Barack Obama comes into office, he inherited a hole in the ground left for him by George Bush, the Great Recession of 2007, 2008. And over the course of two administrations, or two terms rather, he builds a skyscraper, which was incomplete, right? He builds 100 stories. The skyscraper's incomplete. He passes the project on to the new foreman, in this metaphor, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, at the same rate, adds 10 more stories, goes from 100 to 110. So it's higher than it was under Obama, but Obama did the lion's share of the work, right? If you build 100 stories of a 110-story skyscraper and I build the 10, I really shouldn't get all the credit for it. As a matter of fact, if we're going to be really particular and really honest, you should probably get most of the credit since you did most of the work. And then in the last year that Trump was presiding over this project, the whole thing collapses. Not just his 10 stories, but the 100 that he inherited from Barack Obama. And then Joe Biden inherits the pit. That's basically the metaphor for the modern U.S. economy between Obama, Trump, Biden. But Fox and Republicans have it all worked out where, well, context matters in a way that benefits Trump. It doesn't matter when it benefits Biden. And what you get from your predecessor only counts if it advantages Republicans in the narrative. It's so incredibly dishonest. Good on Senator Murphy for making the case so compellingly and doing so on a network that, again, whose viewers might not otherwise get this information. More of this, please. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.